Hey, it's me, Nalthazar, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over an exclusive that is just about to exit the vault called Phyrexian Vindicator. So, let's get into it. To kick things off, I want to thank Octagon for sending me this card so that I could test it out and then ultimately make this video for you guys. Phyrexian Vindicator is one of the exclusives from the new set. It costs $20 US, so it'll be converted to whatever your currency is. And if you pick up the bundle, you're going to get the Vindicator itself, you're going to get some mana crystals, some mana jewels, and then these special boosters that have a whole bunch of really cool cards and very much so boosted odds. So the invasion booster packs are pretty cool. I wound up getting a mythic out of mine, but that is not the primary topic of what it is that I want to talk about today. So what I really wanted to talk about is this Phyrexian Vindicator. This card is absolutely fantastic. As we look at an upcoming standard shift and the Faith Bond Judge rotating out of standard, the whole idea of having a card that is a creature that has prevent damage and then vigilance or defender or, something like that is something that we haven't really had very much of in Puzzle Quest. And it's generally been something that, it's temporary, it goes away, right? So we've had things like Risona, which is going to gain the prevent damage when it deals combat damage to your opponent's Planeswalker. We've had things like the Judge, which I think has maybe been the strongest iteration of something with Defender or Vigilance and prevent damage, but nonetheless, this card's level goes up every turn, and then it eventually loses the prevent damage in favor of Double Strike, which is still fantastic, but it loses the prevent damage. If we take a look at even older cards that have existed in Puzzle Quest, as prevent damage is actually a somewhat newer mechanic to the game. I'm not going to dig all the way far back, but we wound up having, where is she? I know we'll find it, Razia, right? Razia. So she had the defender and the prevent damage. However, when your Planeswalker takes damage, then your opponent's Planeswalker takes the damage, but then this creature loses the prevent damage when it takes damage for 3 turns. So the turn it took it, and then your next turn, and then your opponent's turn. So it was temporary. And the place that I'm trying to get to with all of this is just that we have these cards that have come into the game that have the whole Defender, Vigilance, Prevent Damage, whatever, but they all lose it. Phyrexian Vindicator is the first one that never loses it. It just always has that Prevent Damage and Vigilance. And on top of that, you'll see that it also has Flying. So not only is it able to block everything, but it's able to block everything, and it's just never going to die from blocking things. So it's sort of just a permanent wall that you get on your side of the board. The only thing that would really make it any better is if it had hexproof or something like that so that your opponent couldn't target it with removal. But there are ways around that in the current standard right now anyways, so not something to really fuss about. And not only that, but at 18 mana, it's a pretty reasonable cost, and then the ability that says when this creature is dealt damage, deal that much damage to any opposing target is a really strong ability. I would say that the Phyrexian Vindicator is an entirely terrifying card to run up against, just because, in a player's hands, you're going to make a deck that has really powerful creatures, and so when your opponent drops this thing, unless you have removal, you might wind up having a really big creature that swings into this, and then deals a whole bunch of damage back to you. With potential things like Trample, which actually make it so that it only absorbs damage equal to its toughness, and then all the extra damage winds up going to your opponent's life. So in that case, it's not actually going to be taking the full damage. But let's say that you attacked with a 100 power monster that didn't have Trample. This thing would then block it. It would take no damage, and then it would deal 100 damage back to you, right? If the thing with 100 power had Trample, it would do 5 damage to this, 95 to the player, and it would do 5 back. So either way, it's just that it's a really, really powerful card. And it's a card that, as long as it's in standard, I think is going to be a force to be reckoned with. I think this is definitely a card that you're going to want to chase from the current set. It's a very good card. It's a very powerful card. It's something that you're definitely going to want in your collection. I tried a whole bunch of decks out with it. I used it in the weekend coalition events for the last 2 weeks. And it just felt really good. It felt like a very, very good card. Now, I don't have a whole bunch of cards right now, so that's why you'll see that there's a bunch of stuff that's missing. But there's another thing that I really wanted to point out about the Vindicator, which is that if you don't buy it for money, and I know that I'm making this really on the far tail end of the card's life cycle. I think it has a day left in the shop at the time of me recording and uploading this video. But the reason why I wanted to make sure that I got it out and I posted it was that you'll see that there's actually a full art variant of the Vindicator. So this is a card that is going to go into Fiblethip's Vault, and you'll be able to actually purchase the full art version if you can't actually just go ahead and buy the Vindicator itself. So it's not like, even though this video is going to be coming up at the end of the purchase life cycle for the card, you'll still be able to try and pick it up from Fiblethip, or at the very least when the set, when the next set comes out after this one, you'll be able to go ahead and target this card, as I think this is a card that everybody is going to want to have in their collections. It is a very powerful card. Just flying, vigilance, and prevent damage are just so incredibly fantastic. So the other thing that I wanted to touch upon with this card, the last thing that I'm going to touch upon before I get into the gameplay, is really just on the when this creature is dealt damage, deal that much damage to any opposing target. Because there's some fun hijinks and shenanigans that you can get up to, stuff that I'm not going to be showcasing in this video in terms of gameplay, but you can use effects that deal damage to your own creatures to go ahead and deal damage to this Phyrexian Vindicator, and then have it deal that much damage to your opponent. So if you wind up playing a World Burn card where it burns all creatures and players, as an example, then your opponent would be taking that damage twice. If you ever just wanted to, for giggles, target this thing, then you could have it burn this, and then this thing deals that much damage to your opponent. Or, for that matter, you could use it to get rid of your opponent's creatures as well, because you get to choose the target that you deal the damage to. So, really, this card just offers so much flexibility, so much power. It has a very reasonable mana cost. It's just a really, really good card. So, I'm interested in seeing how some of you guys wind up using this card. I haven't seen too many other people using it. I think I've only played up against it twice in maybe like 50, 100 games where I've been tinkering in the standard area trying to play with it and then run up against other people. So if you've wound up making a deck that's really cool with this card, please go ahead, leave a comment, let me know how you're running it. It's a really, really cool card. So let's go ahead and get into the gameplay. So in this match, I'm using Sarah the Benevolent. When I actually first read this card, I glossed over the fact that it had flying on its own. And so I thought it would be really fun to run it in a Sarah deck and then use Sarah's first ability to give it flying. And then I was like, wait a minute, what am I even doing with my life? And then it also is that whole thing that Sarah then gives it first strike as well. And if you give this thing first strike or double strike, well, it's sort of a problem because then it kills your opponent's creatures before they do damage to it. And if you kill your opponent's creatures before they do damage to it with a first strike type effect, then it doesn't get to do its damage to your opponent. So the rest of the core around this deck that I put together was just a bunch of stuff to draw cards. So you might have seen in the pick 4 that I have both of Teferi and Tamio in the deck. That's just to draw cards more. You'll see that I used the Phyrexian Vindicator's ability right there to actually burn away my opponent's creature. So just to use it as removal. I'm running Morel just because it's a new card to me and I wanted to test it out. But for the most part, I was really just trying to find a way to make it so that I would draw into the Vindicator as consistently as possible so that I could go ahead and get a good idea for how the card felt. And the card just feels amazing. You'll see here that unless my opponent plays something to stop the Vindicator at this point, that they're kind of dead, right? Like once you get the Vindicator down, you win the game unless your opponent plays something that is going to make it so the Vindicator can no longer block. So things like Sigarda's Imprisonment, Sleep with the Fishes, Hixis, those are all problems for it. And they're all pretty common cards to run up against. But you'll see that I'm also running the Scion of Draco is what I think it's called. Yeah, Scion of Draco. It makes it so that if you match a support gem, then it will actually make it so that a creature of yours gains an Evergreen. And the Evergreen that I was hoping to go for with it was Hexproof, which is if it's on a blue gem. But nonetheless, I got pretty unlucky for the most part in my games with Tamio and Teferi. they just didn't really seem to want to be on blue gems, or if they were, like in this game, the blue gems just didn't want to get matched. So that was a little bit of a bummer in terms of like trying to give it hexproof. But honestly, I really didn't have a single game with this card that even wound up being close. Like it was just filthy. So here you're going to see a really cool example. You'll see that my opponent had that creature down that was a 5/7. And so at 5/7, that means that the Vindicator is not going to be killing it in one block. And it's really nice when you have it in a position where it's not going to be killing a creature in one block, because then you can just sort of keep farming that creature's power by having it attack you to deal that much damage to your opponent. And so you'll see that even though I had removal in my hand between the Void Rend, and then I actually had one of the new removal cards as well, I didn't want to use them to get rid of my opponent's creature because I wanted to just keep dealing that extra damage to my opponent. And so even if my opponent wound up getting more tokens down, that was fine by me. My opponent playing additional reinforcements of the platoon dude. This is perfect. I get to do an extra 14 damage back to my opponent now every single turn. 15 because I do one for the little, it's not a human token, the little artifact token. But either way, so you'll see that Tamio has finally reached her shield threshold to make it so that I have full mana to all the cards in my hand every turn, which is entirely correct. That card is just ridiculous. And so I'm going to go ahead, play down all my stuff, and then I'm going to go ahead, swing into my opponent again here. Morel is going to make a whole bunch of little tokens for me, which is always really nice. I like the little tokens. They're my friends. And I think I'm just short of the kill here. Yes, I am. Cool. Which is nice because now I get to kill my opponent for them attacking me. So I felt like this was a really good showcase of the Vindicator and its power. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.